Shah Jahan on empowering test automation with AI. So Shah Jahan, over to you.
Well, thanks again for joining into this session. Who is connected by an audio?
Yeah.
All right, so again, another afternoon session. So let's try to make more interactive. So if you do have any queries in between, do not wait at the end. You can be asking, so we can stop it and we can keep going to more discussion on top of that. So myself, Shah Jahan, currently working as a chief technology architect in the UFT Global, and I've been into the presentations over here in the London area multiple times, but this is the first time I had a number of presentations, national and international levels. So the focus was basically in the automation side. So I'm passionate about developing for testing side and the solution for the test automation. So to understand the background, so just want to ask you, how many of you are from the automation background or familiar about this automation side? We know that AI, we already discussed a lot, right? And you is that in your mind already? You don't want to talk about anything on AI. So, but in this session, slightly different. So what we are going to see that how we can utilize AI, basically the generative AI, to empower the test automation, to get the maximum benefits, how to make life easier by utilizing the generative AI. So to start with, we'll have a quick introduction. Is basically, let's have a quick analysis about the industry, about the software testing defects, and it's kind of a very minimal analysis, but which you have seen multiple forums or kind of things where we need to focus on the testing side. And then we'll moving on to the software testing lifecycle journey, so not the STLC, software testing lifecycle, and where we can fit the generative AI, and what will be the best place or the best way we can utilize AI and to get the benefit into the testing and test automation part. Then the third part, something the interesting part, so we'll get into the Design CoPilot. So we'll discuss that one in detail today. And then we'll be moving on to the end of the session by enabling autonomous test automation activity throughout the testing lifecycle. And probably last 5 minutes, I'll give you a quick demo how we can utilize the generative AI in the Design CoPilot, or what is the benefit we are going to get it on top of. Yeah. So from the software defects analysis, we all know that one. So in multiple phases of the testing. So basically the root cause, the origin of the defect is from the requirement analysis and the design phase, that is 64%. Is just took from the cross-tracks or different forums. So that is the area where we can see that more number of defects are originating from. And that's kind of a 2/3. And then 1/3 is coming out from our coding, the development area and implementation of the software testing, software development activity. And considering that value, so if you check the relative cost of fixing a defect, so if you do something to fix then and there from the requirement or the requirement or user story, we can easily sort out from there and keep moving on to different phases of life cycle. You can see that the designs kind of the normal cost you're going to expect, that's cost and the time. When we are moving on to the development stage, you may need to redesign your activities and go further and into the testing side. So it will be around 15 times. And if you are into the release, it's kind of 100 times. So that's the relative cost we are going to get it for a defects from the testing side. So these factors, when we think about from an test automation, test execution point of view, we definitely need an automation activity to fast track execution of the automation. But we need to see how easy we can find out the defect, how quickly we can move that left shift approach for the test automation activity. So let's get into the life cycle, software testing lifecycle. So normally we'll start with the requirements. So the project will be having some requirements or the user stories. The testers or the QA engineers will be involved into the BDD scenarios if they follow the approach. Then we'll be moving on to the test data preparation and test scenario, detailed BDD scenario preparation, automation scripting. These activities will go probably in parallel to the development. The application development parallel will be having the test automation script development will be going further. Then moving on to the environment setup. So we'll finalize the code in the repository and we'll go for the test environment setup, the UAT, QAT environments or setup things will work out. Then the test execution will start from the development environment like unit testing. The system testing is going to start from that. And then system testing, integration testing, all the test activities, basically the QA engineers used to follow. So the regression testing, system integration test, all these things will happen on the number 5. Then the reporting stage. So the last two is basically I just writing down these numbers from 1 to 7 to follow that DevOps lifecycle approach. So this is the way when we complete the development and the testing, then after completion of a testing, there'll be kind of a quality gate review will be there. So for example, if you do have testing in development environment, you need to have a check, everything is, the checklist is ready, then you can move on to the your QAT environment. So once that is done, you'll be moving on to UAT and pre-prod like that. So further environments will be tested, then that will be there in the continuous delivery model. So that's the life cycle we used to follow. And from that, so we do have a number of places where we'll inject automation to make things easier. So we do have different entities like we all familiar with the testing framework and test automation framework with the BDD, non-BDD, spec flow, but a number of things are there. We all been using in our day-to-day lives. On top of that, there are a number of other components or utilities like AI-based components to make this automation more easier. Something like to make some kind of a scriptless automation, you'll be preparing some kind of an AI algorithms and engine, and probably to make some kind of a automation script, auto heal engines. Like if you do have a website automated with all the components or elements in the website, and something's happened, some elements or particular field is changed, the properties changed, that your script has to update automatically. That's kind of a auto healing engine. So these are the AI components that in the industry being utilized for this automation testing. And then distribution in the sense when you do for an execution. So to load the workload into multiple machines or the Kubernetes or whatever the nodes we are utilizing for the execution, distributed execution can be managed with intelligence. And finally, defect analysis in the sense, if you do have a test execution, probably, for example, if you executed around 100 test case, 50 test case got failed. So even though it's automated everything, you need to spend some time to look into that logs because it's not 50 defects, right? It's just 2 or 3 defects. It makes 50 test case of the scenario failure. For that, we can utilize the AI algorithms to do some kind of a clustering matching in the sense you can check the logs, failure steps, and identify the unique defects from that 50. That may come down into 10. And then again, that 10, we need to connect to the project Jira and see any other open defects are there. Your colleagues might have logged the defects already. You don't want to log it again. So that will be retrieved from the Jira and do some kind of analysis, can come down into the unique defect. These kind of things are utilized for the defect analysis or then logging into the unique defect into the defect management tool. So now, considering the fact we discussed earlier with the analysis, so in the execution stage or after the execution, the quality gate, all these defect analysis, we do have a number of things over there we have been utilizing over there to fast track the test automation activity. So now go back to the requirements and the design stage before automation. How do we identify the defects over there in the early stage of the life cycle? So are you utilized any kind of testing in your requirement validation or requirement testing? Good. Anyone else? What approach you followed in that one?
A careful one.
Nobody would say it's kind of a static testing, right? Just read the sentence and to make sure that their written is correct. Yeah. So let's think that how we can automate that process. Make sure that.
There's a tool, right? They have a tool.
Yeah. Right. let's see how we can utilize this generative AI on top of that to make sure that validations, and how do we take it up from the requirement to user story, and from the user story into the scenarios, and scenarios into the automation script.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, yes.
You know, when we're automatically looking through requirements, we're losing that human interaction and empathy with the product owner and product. So I'm just wondering if there's some kind of empathy that's lost in that kind of
So the domain knowledge, you mean, right?
yeah, domain knowledge and also empathy and with working colleagues. Yeah. I don't know.
Let's discuss in detail that one, yeah. So that's what something we'll see, that how we can utilize the design copilot. So it's kind of design activity, we can automate it with the help of an automation or the generative AI techniques. So let's discuss this in detail. So let's start from the requirement. So probably we'll get two types of things, right? From the requirement stage, you'll be getting the requirements as it is, or you'll be getting the user stories from the business analyst. So let's start from the requirements. If you get the requirements, as you said, it will be completely domain specific or the product specific, what they have requirement is written over there. So when you do then automation testing on top of that, so it's kind of a number of checks we can do that in the sense, avoid any ambiguities in the statement, and to make sure the requirements are singular, and make sure that the requirements are developable or testable. These kind of checks we can do on top of that. It's not something related to domain, because the system or the AI generated things, they don't know what the application is going to work, how it is going to work. If they combine 3-4 user stories or the requirement together, so that makes more confusion to the developer. Some it will come up, so they'll assume something, they'll be design something, and that will go, that issue will go into the further stages of that software development. Finally, it's reached the test scenarios also will be going to a different way of their assumptions. So that's a way we can do some kind of a number of checks, like singular, developable, or testable. These kind of elements can be used. So by reading the sentences, we can say whether that's kind of a single statement or unambiguous, or standards are followed over there. So through an automated way, let's see how we can utilize it. And that's the first stage where we will do this static testing, an automated way of static testing over there. And that will highlight what are the issues within that requirement. Probably it's not singular or ambiguous statements are there, or those kind of things will be highlighted over there. Then maybe the next step is we can pass on that issues into the BA, or the BA itself can look into that one. The business analyst can modify the requirements and make it corrected way of that one. And from there, we do have another option, like from the requirements, if the test team is followed some kind of a BDD approach, we need some kind of a BDD scenarios to be created. For that, we need some kind of a user stories that will be converted into the BDD scenario. So these requirements can be converted into a user stories, and we can see how we can do an automated way of converting some using AI. So the requirement can be converted to user stories. We'll take it from there into a next stage. And the other side, so if we get the requirement instead of requirements, so the user stories are created in the Jira or Azure, what are the tools are using it, the BAs are created, the user stories as it's there. Also, we need to check whether the user stories are created correctly, or any kind of defects, in the sense static testing defects are there in the user story. That can be tested with these kind of concept, like any unambiguous things are there that follow the user story standard format, like generating the user stories. All these things can be checked automatically. Then we can utilize the generative AI concept to correct that user stories. In the sense, if they do have written a complex statement, in the sense number of user stories are combined with AI, so we can split that user stories into multiple user stories, and that will help for the next step to generate the BDD scenarios, or to develop the developers to develop or design the code based on that user story, to make things more simpler and easier, which will reduce the defects in them. Then at the Design CoPilot, something which we created or utilizing in our testing projects in number of clients. So what we are doing over there is, so once we did this automated static testing for the requirements or user story, so either the requirements will be converted to user stories, or the user stories will be auto-corrected after the checks. Then from the user stories, we need to create the BDD scenarios for the testing. So the BDD scenarios will be generated automatically with a comprehensive test coverage, or this kind of a scenario to user story to scenario mapping. So it's kind of a one-to-many mapping would be the number of user stories would be created over there. And from there, that's a crucial part. We have started developing how we can improve over there in the sense from the scenarios, how we can generate the test automation script automatically to make it more autonomous journey over there. So in the sense, there are a number of factors like, so the tools will be vary, right? So there are Selenium, Cypress, a number of Python, number of things will be there in the market. So the based on the test automation framework, the scripting method, the line of code has to change. So based on the input tool, so if that's a Selenium, this is the BDD scenarios over there. So we can see that how we can generate the automation code based on that. So if you take any application, there are domain specific or application specific items like these are the fields or these are the objects to be followed, but keeping that one as a static parameter or something. So the other elements, the functionalities, the operations or validation, these things can be automated in the sense the automation script can be automatically generated over there in some kind of AI concept. Right.
So which generative AI model are you using? What's the engine? What powers all this?
So it's kind of a in-house thing, something which we develop, and behind the scene we are using the OpenAI. I'll show you a sample in 5 minutes here. So I quickly pass on to this slide because I need to go into a demonstration of something working on that. This is kind of enabling the autonomous journey. So the same picture or the same components which we explained earlier from 1 to 7. So from the requirement to the final continuous test integration over there. So the early phase, we can utilize the Design CoPilot or generative AI to do validation of the requirements and user stories. From there, going on to the test scenarios, then test data obviously has to prepare by the users. Then from there, the automation script will have is going to be done with the help of Design CoPilot, and on top of that need to be fine-tuned with the end user. The quality engineers will be preparing that one. Then from the stage number 2 onwards, so that will happen in parallel to the application development. So when the application is ready, so it can go for the further test execution from that environment, in the sense from the dev environment onwards. Unit testing and the same thing will be utilized for the further downstream environments, and we'll continue that journey. And at the end, maybe once we complete the execution in one environment, the quality gate to review that checklist, then it will automatically take into the deployment to the next stage. Then the test has to trigger automatically. We'll continue that journey to CI/CD lifecycle. That's what I mean for the autonomous execution or the complete test pack, which has been automated with any number of tools over here. Yeah. So hey, any other questions before moving on to the next slide?
It's starting testing.
Yeah.
So it's involved only the stories. What about the designs? So the design for the story. That's involved also the static testing, right?
Yeah.
So not be automated integrating because it's separate, let's say, tool which is being using. It's not Jira or Azure, right? But it can be a
So basically the static testing will start from the requirement of the specification, which is coming down from the business analyst. Then that will be loaded into Azure or the Jira, whatever the tools will be going to go. That is captured for the static testing. And parallelly, the design activity, that's maybe high level design, detailed design will be developing from the development team. So that is the next step after the requirement. So this static testing is going to happen even before the design creation.
Well, what you mean, it's more like for designers on the team, which is great, design the file for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good.
The other part is the coding of the developers, which is using that schema. But how you do the starting testing only on the story, not also including both of them, story and design. Because only the developers is taking the design and looking. But when it's coming to the testing, we need to go for the starting testing from the beginning, not only story analyzing, so the design, right?
Absolutely, that's right. So when we get the requirements and user stories, then go into two different channels, right?
Yeah.
One for the testing side, they'll be moving down into the test scenarios, and the developers will be going to their design, high-level design, detail design, go in that channel. From here, we'll do some kind of static testing. We'll make sure that is perfect, that will impact in both sides, and then focusing on the testing side over here. At the moment, what we are doing it here, but obviously it's right. You need to have some kind of a checks from that side as well to make sure that a design is perfect, so that we can eliminate some kind of a defects coming down from the coding based on that baseline design. You're right. So that's another area we need to focus on, and yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Any other questions?
Where does accessibility fit into this?
Again, yeah.
Same answer.
All right, okay, so let me open one sample application. So hopefully that will work from here, firewall block from here. If not, I can samples which I downloaded. So this kind of an automation platform which we have been utilized. So I just want to show you only the Design CoPilot over here. So so in the Design CoPilot, so what we discussed is from the requirement level, we can start at a validation or initial set of validation, or from the user story level. And from there, it's moving on to the BDD scenario generation, and finally it's getting on to the automation script preparation activity. So let me take one sample. Something. Just put some statement, the system should support the password retrieval and password change functionality, just one-liner requirement. We know that it's not clear. And otherwise the user can upload a file over here. These are the two options over here. Just going to validate that one. So this will do some kind of a checks, static testing, what we discussed, to make sure that's a kind of a singular or not, because these kind of checks will be created and that will be validated. Let's look into that result after the user story. And then the user stories case as well. So we do have the user story, so the text will come from the Jira. So what I'm trying to do with that is, so here I just Jira. So there, yeah. So here I do have a number of user stories. I think 1 to 4 user stories are this kind of a task and the defect. So 1 to 4 user stories are there. So when mentioning this project already configured for this particular sample testing projects books API. So it's Google API testing. So from there, we configure the project as this Jira. So when I connect into this Jira and do the validation, what it's going to take it up is just pull that requirement from Jira, and that will go for the next level of checks, in the sense the static level of test, to make sure that the user story standards are followed over there. Yeah. Let me go into that results of that one before moving on to the BDD scenarios checks. The last two are we run. The first one is the requirement, and the top one is the user story one. So before it's get loaded, probably you can I can open any previous execution so that we can save our time. The requirements. So let me see. So the first requirement, so is just checking a couple of components, like whether it's a singular and the statement contains only one statement, and it's kind of we could figure that, so we can see some failure over that because it's not complete actually. So we know that when it's just a single line, it's not complete, and then these are the checks this happen. It's kind of it's a developable requirement or kind of a testable requirement, all these checks happen. And from there, the BAs can understand, or they can just validate the requirement before passing on to the next stage in life cycle. And then from that requirement, so it will generate some kind of a user stories. We just put one single statement over there. So the system should upload this functionality. So then that will convert to these other two user stories can be developed on top of that requirement. And this will be can pass on to the next step as a design or the scenario preparation activity. So just a simple sentence I utilize. So if you have a detailed level of requirement or something, we can pass it into the user story, give us an output using the generative AI. Then the other one, what we checked is from the user story level. To open a previous one is executed some time back, because to save the time, we can open the one which we executed at the end. So these user stories similar to the one is run through the Jira. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the stories which you have seen in the Jira. So what will happen is we just validate those user stories. I think those are kind of right user stories. Haven't reported any kind of issues. All these checks in the sense of the format and everything is kind of a design free. All these checks will be happen through the user story. Design free in the sense not technical terms are utilized over there. So these kind of checks will happen, and that will be validated on top of that. And another report. So this is a set of user stories are there. So the couple of user stories got failed with a different reason. If I take the first one, so similar to the requirement. So some areas and it's not a measurable. So the user story is not a measurable, and user story is not complete. So a couple of failures are noticed over there, and check the correction, how the correction is happening using the generative AI over there is. So let me download that file. So you say that this is one of the user story, and then it just mentions kind of a standard format as a user. So this should happen, and then this is the way we didn't write the user story. It will correct that user story. And in case of any complex things other, it will split into the number of user stories. That's the way this will correct it, and the updated user stories will be given to the user, the business analyst, and they can start utilizing from the other, and they can fine tune based on the, if there is any kind of a domain or product level information is missing over there, that's obviously the BAs can add on top of it. Yeah, so that's the first level of checks will happen there. And then the next thing is when we go into the test scenario. So now we got the user stories checked and validated over there, and then we can connect to Jira, or we can provide the user stories, and we need to get the BDD scenarios to be created from there. So this will get the user stories, and we'll check the comprehensive test coverage, and we'll create all the possible test scenarios for that user stories. And that will help for the automation of the QA engineers to get that test scenario created, and they can review on top of that. They can create more scenarios on that. So let me take one sample report of that one.
Continuous from the requirements you submit.
Yeah.
Same thing. You don't have to resubmit.
No, we can make a continuous journey until the automations.
But what if the requirements are failed? You want to correct it?
So that's up to the user. So right, user do have a choice. They can continue from there, or they can correct the requirement and submit the updated requirement. scenarios here. So this is the BDD scenarios got it from the JIRA. So BT 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 BDDs, sorry, 4 user stories. So these are the user stories we checked it, and now the scenarios are created for that one. So the first user story, 3 scenarios or BDD scenarios are created. And the next user story, another 3 scenarios, and the one. So these are the BDD scenarios created based on some kind of a comprehensive coverage, and the user can review that one and can modify and take it further from that scenario update or creation for the automation script development activity. Rushing into the close time. So the next one is from that BDD scenarios. So we're trying to do over there is how we can create the automation script. So even from the BDD scenario, so you ask a question, right? How we can take the previous one. So we already executed. So you know an ID, something like we have seen, right? For each execution, there'll be an ID will be generated. We got a pop-up over there. So if we go here for the BDD scenario preparation, you can select the previous execution. You can select what is your number, what you executed earlier. So when you select that number, what are the user stories which they populated or created that will be loading into this bucket, and that will be taken up. That's the way we can make it a continuous journey over there. So maybe any successful. So this kind of auto-generated ID, and then this is a user story for that. And then if the user want to modify something, they can modify it over here, and then they can go for the continuous execution. And the last bit for the automation script, similarly, you can upload the scenarios over here, or take it from the previous session. So what generated earlier from the previous number. So see what this is. Yeah. So this is something like this created over there. The previous BDD scenario generated. And we need to mention that which platform we are going to utilize for the automation scripting. Based on that, using that, it will be generated out. And that will start preparing the automation script for the test scenarios which is identified, which is uploaded over here. So I'll show you the sample one here. It's my connectivity is a bit slow on Wi-Fi.
With the automation, is it Selenium and Cypress? We have two of them.
Yep.
Is it good? Connected to a framework that you have seen?
No, so it's completely independent. So it's kind of a services which APIs we develop to create this automation script. So it will follow the standard Selenium syntax or the rules or the Cypress coding standard. It will create the script, and you can take that code, you can utilize it in your framework. I think we understand, so that file taking time, so they came up. Yeah, there's an automation script created from there. You go into the details. So see that one. So we are drilling, which started from the user story. Then we got the scenarios, and the number of scenarios are created for each story. For the first scenario, the BDD scenario, is the linear based, giving you the automation script. It's considering some kind of a factor you need to fill in based on the field or these values. But whatever the validation or these things, that will be listed over there. That's the way the automation script will be generated. It's completely specific to the what scenario is talking about, that level of coding is kind of a line of code will be generated. And this will be kind of under the training things, right? You can keep training over there, it will make the things more related to the framework. And we are just actually trying to see how we can make it more in executable stage. Because for example, if you do have an application UI, so if you automate, so we need to capture the application fields, right? So we do have some kind of AI elements where we can automatically capture the objects within the application. You might be familiar with this, they're in the market. So using that one, you can capture the object and you can fill that one within the code so that it will be ready to clickable execution state. That's what we are trying to do at the moment. But at least skeleton or kind of a structure is coming up, so user can work on top of that.
But otherwise, we do a lot of
Correct.
dynamics or reusable or frameworks.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. So it will be really
Like
useful for them.
insights, how to so you think how to can make it more useful.
Right. Any other questions?
One question
Yes,
about
please.
requirements change. Often I get a product owner tell me now things have changed. So how, I guess, like, does that incorporate, I guess you're incorporating that into your workflow somehow where you can reuse what you've just done, like modify the requirements.
Yes, so we are not saving any data at the moment because based on it will be going to utilize into the number of clients. So based on the data protection, multiple reasons. So we won't save anything over there. We'll just get the input, process it and give it to them back. So if they need to modify the requirement, pass through the cycle again.
Okay, outside of this.
Yeah, outside of this one, yeah. Because it's kind of, as we have seen that one, so we can select the previous execution. We don't want to paste anything. So it will change the requirement. It'll keep going next. You can go to the script.
You still keep that in Jira, for example.
You modify the Jira, then you can pull the requirements again from the Jira. You can look at it. Okay. Yeah. Anything? Yes, please. Yeah. So it's kind of we developed as a bespoke within the USD at the moment and being utilized across the client. So it's not open source. It's kind of a chargeback model that's getting finalized. So right now it's being utilized around 4 places. Just contact me if you need any further details on that. And we are exploring further details on that one. And if you do have anything to contribute into the topic, maybe we can thinking of the open sourcing couple of elements, not